You are listening to HOA Justice Stories. She tried to find me for a guest pass. My name is Coach Ross, and I moved to Milwaukee 6 months ago to rebuild my life after a knee surgery left me hobbling around on a cane. I took an assistant coaching job at a local high school because it kept me close to the game without destroying what was left of my cartilage. The Harborview Community Association looked perfect on paper. Quiet streets, decent lawns, rules that promised order. What I did not know was that order meant control, and control meant Gloria Thomas, the rules enforcement chair who everyone called Diane because she introduced herself that way at every single interaction. She had gray shoulder-length wavy hair, a red blazer she wore like battle armor, a blue visor that never came off, and a laminated rule card she waved around like a warrant. I was standing in my driveway on a Tuesday afternoon, cane in one hand and my phone in the other, staring at a bright orange violation notice stuck to my windshield. Diane was 10 feet away with a clipboard in a clear plastic sleeve, a handheld radio clipped to her belt, and a smile that could crack glass. "You are parked in violation of Section 12-4, she said, tapping the clipboard with her pen. "The lines were repainted last month and your vehicle is encroaching on the guest zone." I looked at my car. It was a silver sedan, parked perfectly inside 2 white lines that were so fresh they still smelled like paint. My bumper was not even close to the curb. I looked back at Diane. "I am inside the lines," I said. "The lines are wrong," she said. "The contractor used the old survey. Your spot is now 8 inches narrower. You have 72 hours to move your vehicle or it will be towed at owner expense." I pointed at the lines with my cane. "These are the lines. I am in the lines. If the lines are wrong, that is not my problem." Diane clicked her pen twice. "Keep talking, I love adding notes." She wrote something on the clipboard, turned, and walked toward the next driveway. Her handheld radio crackled. I heard her say, "Unit 4 compliance sweep complete on Lakeshore Drive, moving to Harborview Court." I stood there holding the notice, my knee throbbing, and wondered what kind of place I had moved into. That night I pulled up the HOA covenants on my laptop. Section 12-4 did mention guest parking zones, but it said nothing about repainting or surveys. I called the property management company the next morning. A board woman named Jessica told me the HOA board had approved a parking reconfiguration in March, but the lines were still under review by the city. I asked if that meant my parking spot was legal. She said it depended on whether the city accepted the new survey. I asked when that would happen. She said she did not know. I asked if I could get a temporary waiver until the city decided. She said I had to submit a written request to the board, and the board met once a month, and the next meeting was 3 weeks away. I thanked her and hung up. I submitted the waiver request that afternoon, printed it, scanned it, and emailed it to the management portal. The portal immediately sent me an error message: "System maintenance in progress. Please resubmit in 24 hours." I tried again the next day. Same error. I called Jessica. She said the portal had been down since Friday and nobody knew when it would be back up. I asked if I could drop off a paper copy. She said the office was remote only and they did not accept walk-ins. I asked if I could mail it. She said certified mail only, and processing could take 10 business days. I asked what I was supposed to do in the meantime. She said follow the rules and avoid violations. I hung up and stared at the orange notice on my counter. 72 hours. I had 60 hours left. The next morning I parked on the street in front of my townhouse. There was no painted curb, no signs, and the covenant said street parking was allowed except during snow emergencies. I went inside, iced my knee, and figured I had bought myself some time. 4 hours later, Diane was back. I opened the door and found her standing on my porch with the clipboard and the handheld radio. Behind her, a flatbed tow truck was idling in the street, amber lights flashing. A man in a stained gray hoodie stood next to the driver door, arms crossed, watching me. Street parking is prohibited on weekdays between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m., Diane said. You have 15 minutes to move your vehicle or it will be towed. I pulled out my phone and opened the Covenant PDF. I scrolled to the parking section and held it up. It says street parking is allowed except during snow emergencies. Diane did not even look. That is the old version. The board amended the rules in April. Your paperwork is cute. Mine has a letterhead. She turned and waved at the tow truck driver. He climbed into the cab. The truck lurched forward. I hobbled down the steps, my cane slipping on the concrete. Wait, I said. I need to see the amended rules. I need proof. Diane clicked her pen. Keep talking, I love adding notes. The driver backed the truck up to my car. The wheel lift arm extended with a hydraulic whine. I limped toward him, pain shooting through my knee, and shouted that I needed 5 minutes. He ignored me. The lift arm slid under my front tire. I pulled out my phone and started recording. You cannot tow me without proof of the rule, I said. The driver looked at Diane. She nodded. He hit a button and the lift engaged. My car rose 6 inches off the pavement. A kid on a bike braked hard at the corner, 1 foot on the ground, staring at us. Another neighbor opened her door and stood on her porch with her arms folded. Diane keyed her radio and said, "Tow in progress, Lakeshore Drive, Unit 2-6. I kept recording. The driver climbed back into the cab. My car was halfway onto the flatbed when a white SUV pulled up and a man in his 50s got out. He wore jeans, a brewer's cap, and a frustrated expression. His name was Stan, and he lived 3 doors down. Diane, he said, this is insane. He is parked legally. Diane turned. The rules changed, Stan. If you have a complaint, submit it in writing. Stan looked at me, then at my car suspended on the lift. He pulled out his phone. I got your back, Coach, he said. I will send you my doorbell footage from last night. She was out here at 11 p.m. with a tape measure and a flashlight, checking every car on the block. Diane stiffened. That is called compliance monitoring, Stan. Stan shook his head. That is called harassment. The driver finished securing my car. He handed Diane a yellow slip, then turned to me. Tow yard is on Fond du Lac Avenue. Retrieval fee is $285, storage is $40 per day. Cash or card? I stared at him. I did not violate anything. He shrugged. Take it up with the HOA, man. I just hooked them. The truck pulled away. I stood in the street with my phone still recording, my knees screaming and my car disappearing around the corner. Diane wrote something on her clipboard, then walked back toward her own townhouse without another word. Stan came over. You need a ride to the tow yard? I shook my head. I need a lawyer. He nodded. I know a guy. I will text you his info. In the meantime, check your HOA portal tonight. I have a feeling Diane did not follow procedure on this one. That night I tried logging into the HOA portal. Still down. I called Jessica again and got voicemail. I called the tow company and asked for a copy of the tow authorization. The dispatcher said it was on file and I could request it in person during business hours. I asked if they validated the rules before towing. He laughed and hung up. I sat on my couch with an ice pack on my knee, scrolling through my phone. Stan had sent me his doorbell footage. The timestamp showed 11:14 p.m. the night before. Diane was crouched next to my car with a tape measure and a small flashlight, measuring the distance from my bumper to the curb. She stood up, wrote something on her clipboard, and walked to the next car. The video was clear. Her face was visible. The blue visor caught the porch light. I stared at the violation letter and smiled, because it proved exactly what I suspected. The next morning, I drove my rental car to the county clerk's office downtown. I asked for a copy of any recent street parking ordinances filed by the Harborview Community Association. The clerk searched the database and came back 20 minutes later with a confused look. "There is nothing here," she said. "The last filing from Harborview was in 2018, and it was about snow removal." I asked if a private HOA could change street parking rules without notifying the county. She said no. If it affects public streets, it has to go through the city. I asked for a signed confirmation letter. She printed one on county letterhead and handed it to me. I drove straight to the tow yard. It was a chain-link lot behind a warehouse, filled with cars in various states of decay. A man in a greasy Carhartt jacket sat in a trailer that smelled like motor oil and cigarettes. I handed him my ID and the yellow retrieval slip. $285 plus 1 day storage, he said. $325 total. I slid the county letter across the counter. This tow was illegal. The HOA does not have the authority to change street parking rules. He glanced at the letter, then pushed it back. "Take it up with them. I got an authorization I tow. You want your car or not?" I paid with my credit card, furious, and drove my car off the lot. I went straight home and printed everything: the doorbell footage screenshots, the county letter, the original covenant section, and the portal error messages. I put it all in a folder and started drafting a formal complaint to the board. That afternoon, Diane was waiting in my driveway again. She had the clipboard, the radio, and a new accessory: a handheld scanner that looked like the ones grocery store clerks used. She pointed it at my license plate, and it beeped. "You retrieved your vehicle without resolving the underlying violation," she said. "That is a secondary infraction under Section 9-2. You now owe a $50 administrative fee, plus the original 72-hour cure period, which restarted this morning at 8 a.m. I held up the folder. "I have proof that your tow was illegal." The county says the HOA does not have the authority to ban street parking. You violated state law. Diane smiled. "Your paperwork is cute, mine has a letterhead." She turned and keyed her radio. "Compliance logged, Unit 2-6, secondary infraction recorded." I called Stan. He came over 10 minutes later with his laptop. We sat in my kitchen and went through every HOA document we could find. The amended parking rules Diane kept referencing did not exist in any official filing. The last board meeting minutes posted on the portal were from February, and they mentioned nothing about parking changes. Stan pulled up the April meeting minutes from his own saved files. There was a vote on a landscaping budget and a vote to table a fence proposal. No parking vote. I looked at Stan. She made it up. He nodded. Or the vote happened without a quorum. Either way, it is not enforceable. I asked what a quorum was. He explained that the HOA bylaws required at least 5 board members present to pass any rule change. The board had 7 members total. He pulled up the bylaws on his laptop and showed me Section 4-3. "If they did not have 5, the vote is invalid," he said. "And if the vote is invalid, every tow, every fine, every fee they have charged under that rule is void." I leaned back in my chair, my knee aching, and thought about Diane with her clipboard and her scanner and her radio, running a one-woman enforcement empire on rules that did not exist. "I need to see the meeting minutes," I said. "The real ones." Stan grinned. "I know a board member who hates Diane. Give me until tomorrow." The next morning, Stan showed up with a USB drive. He plugged it into my laptop and opened a folder labeled April Meeting Audio. There were 3 files. He clicked the second one. Diane's voice came through the speakers, sharp and impatient. We need to move forward on the parking reconfiguration. I have the contractor lined up and the signs are ready to order. Another voice, male, older. We do not have the votes tonight, Diane. Linda and Mark are both out. We are at 4. Diane again. We can table it and handle it via email vote. The older man. That is not how the bylaws work. Diane, louder. Then we do it as an emergency action under Section 6-1. Public safety justification. A long pause. Then a woman's voice, uncertain. I do not think parking reconfiguration counts as an emergency. Diane, sharp. Fine. I will handle it myself and bring the receipts next month. The file ended. Stan looked at me. She went rogue. No quorum, no vote, no approval. She just did it. I stared at the laptop screen. I have her on tape admitting it. Stan nodded. And I have the attendance log from that meeting. 4 board members present. She needed 5. Everything she has done since April is invalid. I copied the files onto my own drive and added them to my folder. I now had doorbell footage, county confirmation, meeting audio, and a quorum log. I called the property management company and demanded a hearing. Jessica said the next available slot was in 6 weeks. I said I wanted an emergency session under the dispute resolution clause in the bylaws. She sighed and said she would check with the board president. 2 days later, I got an email. Emergency hearing scheduled for Saturday at 10 a.m., Community Center Conference Room. You have 10 minutes to present your case. All evidence must be submitted in advance. I replied with my entire folder as attachments. Then I printed 3 copies of everything and put them in a binder. Saturday morning, I showed up early. The conference room was small, with a folding table and 8 chairs. 5 board members sat on one side. Diane sat at the far end with her clipboard, her radio, and a stack of papers. The board president was a man in his 60s with white hair and reading glasses. His name was Ed. He looked tired. Coach Ross, Ed said, "You have 10 minutes. Go ahead." I opened my binder and started. I was illegally towed on a rule that does not exist. The HOA never filed the parking changes with the county, which means any restrictions on public streets are void. I have a county letter confirming this. I also have doorbell footage showing Diane conducting compliance sweeps at 11 p.m., which violates quiet hours under Section 3-7. And I have meeting audio proving the April parking vote failed due to lack of quorum. I slid the binder across the table. Ed picked it up and flipped through the pages. The other board members leaned in. Diane sat perfectly still, her face blank. Ed looked at Diane. "Did we have quorum in April?" Diane did not blink. We had sufficient attendance to move forward under emergency provisions. Ed frowned. There is no emergency provision for parking reconfiguration. Diane tapped her stack of papers. Section 6-1 allows the board to act on public safety matters without a full vote. I pulled out my phone, opened the audio file, and hit play. Diane's voice filled the room. "Fine. I will handle it myself and bring the receipts next month." The room went silent. Ed set the binder down. "Diane, did you authorize the parking changes without board approval?" Diane's jaw tightened. "I acted in the best interest of the community." Ed removed his glasses. "That is not an answer." One of the other board members, a woman in her 50s, spoke up. "If we did not have quorum, every fine and tow under this rule is invalid. We are looking at refunds, liability, maybe even legal action." Diane stood up. This is a coordinated attack by a disgruntled resident who refuses to follow basic community standards. I leaned forward. I followed every rule that actually exists. You made up the rest. Diane pointed at me. Keep talking, I love adding notes. Ed raised his hand. Diane, sit down. We are going to table this hearing and schedule a full board review. In the meantime, all enforcement actions under the April parking rules are suspended pending investigation. Diane did not sit. She picked up her clipboard and walked out of the room. Her radio crackled as the door swung shut behind her. Ed looked at me. I apologize, Coach. This should not have happened. We will get you a refund for the tow and storage fees, and we will review every citation issued under this rule. I thanked him and left. Stan was waiting in the parking lot with 2 coffees. He handed me one. How did it go? I told him. He grinned. Diane is done. I hoped he was right, but I knew better. People like Diane did not just quit. 2 days later, I got another email. Subject line: compliance hearing, mandatory attendance required. The body of the email said I was being charged with hostile conduct during a board meeting, failure to submit evidence within the 72-hour window, and misuse of recording devices on HOA property. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday at 6 p.m., and failure to attend would result in automatic penalties, including possible lien placement. If you are enjoying this story, hit the like button and subscribe for more HOA nightmare tales. I forwarded the email to Stan. He called me 30 seconds later. This is retaliation, he said. She is trying to bury you in process before the board can finish their review. I asked what I should do. He said, show up, record everything, and do not let her control the room. Thursday night, I walked into the same conference room. This time, only 3 board members were present: Ed, the woman from Saturday, and a younger man I had not seen before. Diane sat at the head of the table with a new stack of papers and a satisfied smile. Ed looked uncomfortable. Coach Ross, you are here to address allegations of hostile conduct and procedural violations. Diane has submitted a formal complaint. I sat down and set my phone on the table, recording light on. Diane glanced at it, then at Ed. Recording devices are not permitted in closed disciplinary hearings, she said. Ed hesitated. Actually, the bylaws allow recordings during any hearing where penalties may be imposed. Diane's smile tightened. Fine. She opened her stack of papers and began reading. On Saturday, May 17th, Coach Ross disrupted a board hearing by playing unauthorized audio recordings, made false accusations against a board member, and refused to follow procedural guidelines for evidence submission. Under Section 14-8, these actions constitute hostile conduct and justify immediate penalties, including fines up to $500 and suspension of community privileges. I waited until she finished. Then I opened my own folder. The hearing notice I received said I had 10 minutes to present my case. I used 8. The email you sent me on Tuesday confirmed that all evidence was submitted in advance, which I did. The audio recording I played was directly relevant to my case and was played during my allotted time. Nothing I did violated any procedural rule. What I did do was prove that you authorized enforcement actions without board approval, which is a violation of the bylaws and possibly state law. Diane leaned forward. Your interpretation is irrelevant. The board has the authority to discipline residents who disrupt community operations. Ed cleared his throat. Diane, the board has not voted on any discipline yet. That is why we are here. Diane turned to him, her face hard. Then let's vote. Ed looked at the other 2 board members. The woman shook her head. The younger man said, "I need more time to review this." Diane stood up. "This is absurd. We have clear grounds for penalties and you are stalling because you are afraid of one resident with a grudge." Ed set his pen down. "Diane, we are not voting tonight. This hearing is postponed until we complete the review of the April parking rules. If that review finds that your enforcement actions were unauthorized, this complaint becomes moot." Diane grabbed her papers and her clipboard. She looked at me, her smile gone. "Your paperwork is cute. Mine has a letterhead." She walked out. The radio on her belt crackled as the door closed. The younger board member looked at me. "Coach, I am sorry. This has gotten out of hand." I thanked him and left. Stan was waiting outside again. He had a grin on his face. "Check your email," he said. I pulled out my phone. There was a new message from Ed, sent 10 minutes ago. Subject line: Board decision. The body of the email said the board had completed an emergency review of the April meeting records and determined that the parking rule changes were unauthorized. All fines, fees, and enforcement actions under those rules were voided. Refunds would be processed within 10 business days. Additionally, the board was scheduling a vote to remove Diane from the rules enforcement chair position pending further investigation. Stan clapped me on the shoulder. "You did it." I wanted to feel relieved, but I knew Diane would not let this go quietly. The next morning, I woke up to 6 missed calls and a voicemail from Jessica at the property management company. Her voice was tense. "Coach Ross, please call me as soon as possible. There has been an incident." I called her back. She answered on the first ring. "Diane filed a counter-complaint with the management company," Jessica said. "She is claiming you harassed her, vandalized HOA property, and conspired with other residents to defame her. She has requested an emergency injunction to bar you from all HOA meetings and common areas until the complaint is resolved." I sat down hard on my couch. She is making it up. Jessica sighed. "I know, but the management company has a policy. Any complaint involving harassment or safety triggers an automatic investigation. It could take weeks." I asked what that meant for me. She said I would be restricted from attending board meetings or using any common areas, including the pool, the clubhouse, and the walking trails, until the investigation concluded. I asked if I could appeal. She said yes, but appeals took 30 days minimum. I hung up and immediately called Stan. He did not answer. I tried again. Voicemail. I texted him. No response. 2 hours later, I got a text from a number I did not recognize. It was Stan's wife. "Stan got a letter this morning from the HOA. They are threatening to fine him for allowing unauthorized recordings on his property. He is freaking out. I am sorry, Coach. We cannot help you anymore." I stared at the text. Diane was going scorched earth. That afternoon, I drove to a print shop and made copies of everything I had: the doorbell footage, the meeting audio, the county letter, the quorum log, and every email from Ed and Jessica. I put one set in a safe deposit box and mailed another set to a lawyer Stan had recommended before he went silent. Then I drafted a formal complaint to the Wisconsin Department of Financial Institutions, which oversees HOA management companies. I included every document and a timeline of Diane's actions. I sent it certified mail. 3 days later, I got a call from an unknown number. A man's voice, calm and professional. "Coach Ross, this is Investigator Daniels with the Milwaukee Police Department. I understand you have been having issues with your homeowners association." I told him everything. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "We have had complaints about this HOA before. mostly noise disputes and parking arguments. But if you have evidence of fraud or extortion, that changes things. Can you send me what you have?" I emailed him the entire folder. He called me back 2 hours later. "This is solid," he said. "I am going to look into the tow company too. If they are towing vehicles without valid authorization, that is a separate criminal issue. Sit tight and do not engage with Diane or the board until I contact you again." I agreed and hung up. For the first time in weeks, I felt like someone was actually listening. The following Monday, I got a text from a neighbor I barely knew. Her name was Rachel, and she lived across the street. The text said, "You need to see this." She sent me a screenshot of a group chat. The chat was titled Harborview Compliance Team. There were 8 members, including Diane. The messages went back months. I scrolled through them, my stomach tightening. Diane had been coordinating with the tow company directly. She sent them photos of cars, license plates, and addresses. The tow company owner replied with pickup times and fee breakdowns. In one message, Diane wrote, "I want Unit 2-6 prioritized. He has been a problem since day one." Another message, "From 2 weeks ago, Stan is helping him. We need to shut that down. Can you tag his car next sweep?" The tow company owner replied, "On it." I forwarded the screenshots to Investigator Daniels. He called me 20 minutes later. "Where did you get this?" "A neighbor. She is in the chat. She has been saving everything." Daniels was quiet for a moment. "This is conspiracy to commit theft by fraud. I need to talk to her. Can you put me in touch?" I texted Rachel and asked if she would talk to the police. She replied immediately, "Yes. I am done with Diane." That afternoon, Daniels called me again. "I just spoke with your neighbor. She is willing to testify. I am also getting a warrant for the tow company's records. If they have been operating under fraudulent authorizations, they are looking at criminal charges and civil liability. This could get big." I asked what I should do. He said stay low, avoid Diane, and let him work. He also said I should attend the next board meeting if the management company allowed it. He wanted to see how Diane reacted when the pressure increased. The next board meeting was scheduled for Thursday. Ed sent me an email confirming I was allowed to attend despite Diane's injunction request. He also said the board would be voting on her removal from the Rules Enforcement Chair position. Thursday night, I arrived early. The community center was packed. At least 30 residents were crammed into the conference room, standing along the walls and sitting on folding chairs. Stan was there, sitting near the back. He gave me a small nod. Rachel was there, too, arms folded, staring straight ahead. Diane sat at the board table with her clipboard and her radio. She looked calm, but her knuckles were white around the pen. Ed called the meeting to order. First item on the agenda: vote to remove Diane Thomas from the position of Rules Enforcement Chair due to unauthorized enforcement actions and procedural violations. Diane stood up. "I would like to make a statement before the vote." Ed nodded. "You have 2 minutes." Diane looked around the room. "I have served this community for 6 years. I have kept our streets safe, our property values high, and our standards intact. What you are seeing tonight is a coordinated effort by a small group of disgruntled residents who do not want to follow the rules. They have fabricated evidence, manipulated recordings, and launched a smear campaign to remove me because I hold them accountable. If you vote to remove me, you are telling every future rules violator that they can lie, cheat, and harass their way out of responsibility." She sat down. The room was silent. Ed looked at the other board members. "Any discussion?" The woman from the earlier hearings raised her hand. "I have reviewed all the evidence. The April parking vote did not have quorum. The enforcement actions were unauthorized. The refunds alone are going to cost the HOA thousands of dollars. This is not a smear campaign. This is accountability." The younger board member nodded. "I agree. We have to vote yes." Ed looked at Diane. "All in favor of removing Diane Thomas from the Rules Enforcement Chair position, say aye." 5 voices said aye. Diane did not move. "The motion passes," Ed said. "Diane, you are removed from the chair effective immediately. You will remain on the board as a general member, but you no longer have enforcement authority." Diane stood up slowly. She picked up her clipboard and her radio. Then, she looked directly at me. "This is not over," she said. She walked out. The room erupted in whispers. Ed banged his pen on the table. "Next item. We are also voting tonight on whether to terminate our contract with Summit Towing and seek bids from other vendors. This follows recent complaints about irregular towing practices." A man in the back raised his hand. "I got towed last month from my own driveway. They said it was an HOA authorization. I never got a notice." Another woman stood up. "Same thing happened to me. They towed my car from a guest spot while I was helping my daughter move in." Ed nodded. "We are aware of multiple complaints. The board is recommending we terminate the contract immediately and issue refunds for any invalid tows. All in favor, say aye." The vote was unanimous. After the meeting, Rachel came over. She handed me a USB drive. "This is everything from the group chat, plus some emails Diane sent to the tow company. I already gave copies to the police, but I thought you should have them too." I thanked her. Stan joined us. He looked exhausted. "I am sorry I went dark," he said. "They threatened to lien my house." I told him it was fine. He had done enough. That night, I went through the USB drive. The emails were damning. Diane had been billing the tow company for administrative fees on every tow, collecting $25 per vehicle under the table. Over the past year, she had pocketed more than $3,000. There were also emails between Diane and the tow company owner discussing which residents to target and how to maximize fees. One email, dated 2 weeks before my first tow, said, "New guy in Unit 2-6. Retired coach. Drives a silver sedan, walks with a cane. He is not going to fight back. Start with street parking. Then move to driveway violations." I forwarded everything to Investigator Daniels. He replied within minutes, "This is gold. Arrest warrant is being drafted." The next morning, I was sitting in my kitchen drinking coffee when I heard shouting outside. I looked through the window and saw Diane standing in the middle of the street, yelling into her phone. A patrol car pulled up. 2 officers got out. One of them was Investigator Daniels. Daniels walked up to Diane. She lowered her phone. They spoke for less than a minute. Then Daniels pulled out a pair of handcuffs. Diane stepped back, shaking her head. Daniels said something I could not hear. Diane put her hands behind her back. Daniels cuffed her and guided her into the back of the patrol car. The street was silent. Rachel stood on her porch, arms crossed. Stan opened his door and gave me a thumbs up. Daniels walked over to my townhouse and knocked. I opened the door. "She is being charged with theft by fraud and conspiracy to commit theft," he said. "The tow company owner is being arrested too. You should get a call from the district attorney's office in the next few days. They will probably want a statement." I thanked him. He nodded and walked back to his car. The patrol car pulled away, Diane in the back seat, her face blank. That afternoon, Ed called me. He sounded shaken. "The board just held an emergency meeting. We are dissolving the compliance committee entirely and revising the enforcement procedures. We are also going to require all future rule changes to go through a resident vote. I wanted to thank you. What you did took guts." I told him I just wanted to park my car. He laughed. "Well, you can park wherever you want now." 2 weeks later, I got a check in the mail from the HOA. It was a refund for the tow, the storage fees, and the $50 administrative fee Diane had charged me. The check also included a $200 settlement for emotional distress and lost time. Attached was a letter from Ed apologizing on behalf of the board and confirming that all of Diane's enforcement actions had been voided. I deposited the check and went for a walk around the neighborhood. The parking lines were still there, but nobody cared anymore. People parked on the street, in their driveways, wherever they wanted. The compliance sweeps had stopped. The handheld scanners were gone. The radio chatter was silent. A month later, the district attorney called me. Diane had taken a plea deal: restitution to the HOA and affected residents, probation, and a permanent ban from serving on any HOA board in Wisconsin. The tow company owner was facing similar charges and had agreed to pay back every invalid tow fee from the past 2 years. Stan threw a barbecue to celebrate. Half the neighborhood showed up. Rachel brought her doorbell camera footage on a laptop, and we watched it together, laughing at how absurd it all looked in hindsight. Someone made a joke about Diane's visor. Someone else did an impression of her with the clipboard. It felt good to laugh. As I stood there with a burger in one hand and a soda in the other, my knee finally starting to heal, I thought about how close I had come to just paying the fees and letting it go. How easy it would have been to move, to give up, to let Diane win. But I did not, and neither did Stan or Rachel or the other residents who had been harassed and ignored for years. A few weeks later, the board held a special election to fill Diane's seat. A retired teacher named Margaret ran on a platform of transparency and resident input. She won in a landslide. At her first meeting, she proposed a new rule. Any enforcement action had to be approved by at least 2 board members and documented with photos and written justification. The board voted unanimously to pass it. I ran into Ed at the grocery store a month after that. He told me the HOA had hired a new management company, one that actually responded to emails and phone calls. He also said the board was planning to repaint all the parking lines with input from residents, so everyone would know exactly where they could park. Things were not perfect. The HOA still had rules, and people still complained, but the culture had shifted. There was accountability now. There was process. There was no more Diane with her clipboard and her radio and her endless violations. I was sitting on my porch one evening, watching the sun set over the neighborhood, when a car pulled up. It was Investigator Daniels. He got out and walked over. "I wanted to give you an update," he said. "The state HOA Oversight Board just opened an investigation into Harborview. They are looking at financial records going back 5 years. If they find more irregularities, there could be additional charges." I asked if that meant more trouble for Diane. He nodded. "She kept terrible records," he said. "Every email, every receipt, every transaction. She thought she was untouchable. Turns out, she was just sloppy." He handed me a business card. "If you ever have issues again, call me. I am keeping an eye on this place." I thanked him. He drove away. That night, I got a text from Rachel. She had started a neighborhood group chat, not for compliance, but for organizing events and helping each other out. She asked if I wanted to join. I said yes. The next board meeting was quiet. Margaret ran it efficiently. There were no shouting matches, no secret votes, no surprise enforcement actions. When it was over, I walked out feeling like I actually lived in a community instead of a surveillance state. Stan caught up with me in the parking lot. "You ever think about running for the board?" I laughed. "Not a chance." He grinned. "Fair enough. But if you change your mind, you have got my vote." I went home, made dinner, and sat down to watch the Brewers game. My knee was still sore, but it was healing. My car was parked in my driveway, inside the lines with no orange stickers and no threats. The HOA portal was working again. The management company answered my emails. Life was normal, boring even, and I loved it. A few months later, I was at a gas station filling up my car when I heard a voice behind me. Coach Ross. I turned. It was Diane. She looked different. No red blazer, no visor, no clipboard. She wore jeans and a plain gray sweatshirt. Her hair was down. She looked older. I just wanted to say I am sorry, she said. I got carried away. I thought I was helping the community, but I was just making everyone miserable. I did not know what to say. I settled for a nod. She looked at the ground. I know you probably do not believe me, but I hope things are better now. She walked back to her car and drove away. I stood there for a moment watching her taillights disappear. I did not forgive her, but I did not have to. The system had worked. The rules had been enforced. The damage had been repaired. That was enough. I got back in my car and drove home. The porch lights were on. The neighborhood was quiet. I parked in my driveway, inside the lines, and went inside. A week later, the board held its annual meeting to review the budget and vote on next year's projects. I attended out of curiosity. Margaret opened the meeting by thanking everyone for their patience during the transition. She announced that the HOA had received refunds from the old management company for overbilling, and the board was planning to use the money to repave the main road and install new streetlights. Someone asked about enforcement. Margaret said the new compliance officer, a retired police sergeant named Tom, would handle violations with a warning first approach. No more surprise tows, no more ambush citations. Everything would be documented, and residents would have a chance to respond before penalties were applied. The room applauded. After the meeting, Tom introduced himself. He was in his 60s with a crew cut and a firm handshake. He asked how things were going for me. I told him they were fine. He nodded. If you ever have an issue, come to me directly, he said. No more clipboards, no more radicals, no more games. I believed him. That weekend, Stan invited me to a cookout. I showed up with a case of beer and a bag of chips. The backyard was full of neighbors I barely knew. People introduced themselves, shared stories, and laughed about the chaos of the past few months. Someone brought up Diane. Someone else made a joke. Everyone groaned. Rachel walked over with a plate of burgers. She handed me one and sat down. You know, she said, a lot of people were too scared to fight back. They just paid the fines and kept quiet. You changed that. I shrugged. I just wanted to park my car. She smiled. Well, you did more than that. You gave people a reason to care about this place again. I thought about that, about how one rigged vote, one fake rule, one power-hungry board member had almost destroyed an entire community, and how one refusal to back down had turned the whole thing around. It was not heroic. It was just stubborn. But sometimes, stubbornness is enough. Months passed. The new streetlights went up. The road got repaved. The parking lines were redrawn with input from residents. The HOA hired an independent auditor to review the financials, and they found more irregularities tied to Diane. The State Oversight Board issued a formal report recommending stricter rules for HOA board elections and enforcement practices. Diane moved away. I heard she went to Florida. I did not ask for details. The neighborhood felt different now. People waved when they drove by. Kids rode their bikes in the street. The compliance sweeps were gone. The radios were silent. I was sitting on my porch one evening watching the sunset when a tow truck drove past. For a second, my chest tightened. Then I saw the logo on the side. It was a different company, the new vendor the board had hired. The truck turned the corner and disappeared. I relaxed. Stan walked over with 2 beers. He handed me one and sat down. You ever think about what would have happened if you had just paid the fine? I took a sip. All the time. He nodded. It would have kept going. She would have kept pushing. Eventually, someone would have sued or moved, and the HOA would have collapsed. I thought about that, about how close the whole thing had come to disaster. But it did not, I said. Stan raised his beer. No, it did not. We sat there in silence, watching the sky fade from orange to purple. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. A car door slammed. A porch light flickered on. Normal sounds. Normal life. And it felt like the greatest victory of all. A few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from the district attorney's office. Diane's probation was being extended due to a probation violation. She had contacted the tow company owner despite a no-contact order. The DA wanted to know if I wanted to file a restraining order. I thought about it. Then I called the DA and said no. She was gone. The HOA was fixed. There was no point in prolonging it. The DA respected my decision and closed the case. That night I deleted all the emails, all the recordings, all the documents. I kept one copy in the safe deposit box just in case, but I did not want to look at them anymore. I wanted to move on. And I did. Life went back to normal. I coached. I rehabbed my knee. I parked my car wherever I wanted. The HOA sent out monthly newsletters with boring updates about landscaping and holiday decorations. Nobody complained. One evening I ran into Ed at the community center. He was carrying a box of files. Cleaning out the old records, he said, getting rid of everything from Diane's time as chair. Fresh start. I helped him load the boxes into his car. As we finished, he turned to me. You know, a lot of people wanted to thank you, but they did not know how. So I am saying it now. You saved this place. I shook his head. I just did not want to get screwed. He laughed. Well, you did not. And neither did anyone else. That is what matters. He drove away. I stood there in the parking lot, watching the sun dip below the horizon, and thought about how strange it all was. How something as small as a parking violation had turned into a full-scale investigation. Arrests, refunds, and a complete overhaul of the HOA. But that is how it works. One person pushes back, then another, and eventually, the system bends. Or breaks. In this case, it bent just enough. I walked back to my townhouse, unlocked the door, and went inside. The folder was gone. The USB drive was gone. The safe deposit box would stay locked. The fight was over. And I had won. A year later, I was standing in the same driveway, loading my car for a weekend trip, when a moving truck pulled up across the street. A young couple got out, looking around nervously. The woman held a baby. The man carried a clipboard. I walked over and introduced myself. "Welcome to Harborview," I said. The man shook my hand. "Thanks. We heard this is a nice neighborhood." I smiled. "It is now." He asked if there were any rules he should know about. I told him to read the covenants, pay his dues on time, and if he ever got a violation notice, call the board before paying. He looked confused. Why? Because things used to be different here, I said. But they are not anymore. Just make sure you know your rights. He nodded slowly. Okay. Thanks. I went back to my car and finished loading. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The couple was unloading boxes, talking to their new neighbors, starting their life in Harborview. And I hoped they would never have to deal with what I did. Because nobody should. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next HOA story.